Hey guys, Dave here, and Codemasters are back with another installment of the Dirt series. This time we're looking at Dirt 4. It's essentially an extension of Dirt Rally, bringing the hardcore rally racing model to a more accessible audience. In this case, there are two handling modes available, one geared toward accessibility and the other geared towards hardcore driving simulation. Underpinning that is of course the same engine and technology that powered Dirt Rally, and that means we've got a game targeting 60 frames per second on consoles, using various refinements over the previous game, from the physics and handling model to certain parts of the visual pipeline, such as lighting, animation and character modeling. One of the things that also stands out is PlayStation 4 Pro support. Now, in the last couple of months, Pro support hasn't been all that great in terms of games utilizing higher resolutions or simply providing a ramped up experience at 1080p. But there are a number of improvements here, from enhanced anti-aliasing, increased shadow resolution, tweaks to reflections, and more. So it looks like this could be a promising showing on Sony's premium console. But with that said, how well does the game hold up across all console platforms? Well, that's what we're going to take a look at today. So let's start with a look at base PS4 and Xbox One versions. Both target 60 frames per second and operate using a dynamic resolution scaler, which basically prioritizes hitting that 60 FPS target over image quality in order to get a more consistent level of smoothness and controller response throughout. Out of the two, it's fair to say that image quality is more refined on the Sony platform. The game generally maintains native 1080p even in demanding stress points. That's not to say there isn't the potential for the resolution to drop below, it's that we haven't noticed evidence of it so far when poring over various screenshots and when playing the game. On Xbox One, the presentation isn't quite as refined. Dynamic resolution scaling tends to kick in more often, meaning that even the more traditional rally stages, which are the least demanding aspects of the game, tends to see a drop just below 1080p at points. In fact, we count around sort of 900p here, resulting in a slightly softer presentation momentarily, which leads to slightly more shimmering and jaggies appearing on screen. The difference isn't always pronounced, but there's a sense that generally speaking the presentation is more refined on PS4 hardware, and I feel here that Codemasters have perhaps taken the right decision in order to prioritise frame rate over resolution. That being said, when looking at performance, it becomes clear that frame rates aren't quite as stable as they could be, and in that respect the dynamic resolution scaler could have been more aggressively implemented in order to allow for a smoother gameplay experience. But that's something we'll be taking a look at in a moment. Back to the comparison, and outside of resolution, both consoles are effectively identical. Shadow quality and general effects work appear identical across PS4 and Xbox One, with differences in these areas really stemming from variances in time of day and lighting. Essentially, weather conditions are somewhat random even when replaying the same single player campaign events on both versions, and naturally shadow representation and effects work appear slightly differently depending what conditions are present. PlayStation 4 Pro, on the other hand, well, Codemasters has specifically layered on several enhancements. For a start, image quality is improved through the use of an increased amount of multi-sample anti-aliasing, which basically offers up a slightly more refined look to the presentation. There's less jaggies across distant scenery, and everything appears a little bit more stable. Coverage is actually extended across more of the scene, so things such as the rear view mirror rendering features MSAA across the scenery being displayed, whereas on base hardware there's no MSAA in this particular location, and generally it just means the presentation looks cleaner across the board. It's not a revolutionary upgrade, but it's still noticeable, particularly if you're going to be playing the game on a larger HD TV screen. Speaking of HD TV support, the Pro version of Dirt 4 is geared towards 1080p screens, so if you're hooking up the PS4 Pro to a 4K display with 4K output, you're still only getting native 1080p. There's no enhanced resolution or 4K mode here. Instead, Codemasters have kind of tailored the Pro experience towards delivering a higher precision 1080p experience. Better AA is perhaps the most noticeable part, but there are also other effects too. And at least for 1080p owners, I do find the difference quite noticeable, particularly with regards to image quality. This is probably the most obvious difference between the Pro versus base PS4, with other refinements appearing a lot more subtle. For example, both shadow map and reflection resolutions are increased on PS4 Pro, allowing these elements to appear slightly sharper and slightly more detailed, particularly with regards to the reflections, where these appear a little more precise when closely looking at car bodywork and the windows. Likewise, shadow quality across the ground also appears more refined and slightly smoother on the Pro, but I gotta say, these are the kind of things that playing the game, going from one version to the next, didn't really stick out at me. It's only something that you can really notice when studying static screenshots or really scrutinizing the presentation at slow speed. Something that enhances the overall presentation, but very subtly. It's fair to say then that in terms of raw visual upgrades, PlayStation 4 Pro offers more of a gentle refinement to the overall presentation than any dramatic differences. That said, there is one area where Sony's premium console definitely delivers a tangible advantage in terms of gameplay, and that of course is performance. As with Dirt Rally, Dirt 4 targets 60 frames per second across all consoles, delivering a much crisper, more responsive experience than say the previous Dirt games on the last generation machines, and that's a great thing. In terms of the core rallying stages, all three platforms offer up a great, smooth experience. Base PS4 and Xbox One rarely falter from the desired 60 FPS target. There's an occasional drop frame, maybe an occasional tear from time to time, but it's impossible to spot during gameplay, and really the experience here feels very consistent overall. And yeah, it's great to play this kind of game at high frame rates. Traditional rallying is naturally at the core of Dirt 4, but there are other kind of more entertaining modes for casual gamers looking for some racing action. In this case, stuff like Rallycross and Land Rush, where you get to race against other opponents. This is pretty cool, although it's here where performance is most visibly impacted. Across base PS4 and Xbox One, there are points where there's noticeable tearing and heavy frame rate drops. Whenever you're at the starting grid or right up in the pack, the use of heavy alpha effects and increased level of detail really puts a strain on the engine, and I have to say the experience isn't that great here. I find the judder and wobble caused by the tearing and drop frames to be pretty distracting, and this is more prominent on Xbox One, leading to a less satisfactory experience on Microsoft's console here. PS4 often has the advantage, but performance again isn't quite as smooth as we'd like, and there's a sense that the engine is been more optimized around the traditional rally stages rather than these more demanding racing events. And that's where Pro comes in. PlayStation 4 Pro handles these more traditional racing events with relative ease, hitting an almost perfect 60 FPS throughout. It's not quite perfect, there are occasional 1 or 2 FPS drops with a torn frame or two, but this really goes unnoticed during gameplay, and essentially the look and feel is that of a consistent, solid 60 FPS presentation. These events are awesome to play if you become bored of straight up rallying, and on the Pro, it's clear that the console is the best machine for the job at hand. Although I will say that it would have been nice to have an absolute 60 FPS lock on Pro across all modes. The enhanced visual effects on offer are really quite subtle, and in my opinion it might have been worthwhile paring back shadow reflection quality more in line to base hardware in order to get a locked 60 FPS. But either way, you are still getting a visibly better experience on the Pro. What's also interesting here is that replays are actually targeting 30 frames per second. This is kind of intriguing because I guess replays are more demanding on system resources. The camera angles shift to reveal more scenery outside of the track, and when there's multiple cars on screen, I suspect this is going to cause more of a problem compared to say the standard rally races. My suspicions are that there may not be enough horsepower in order to deliver a 60 FPS lock. So in that respect, while it's disappointing that we're not getting a boost in frame rates in replays on the Pro, at least we are getting a consistent experience. If you want to get a complete 60 FPS experience, then the only option is really PC. And while I've only had a very brief chance to check the game out on this format, there's lots of options available to allow for scalability between different tiers of hardware. And of course you can tailor the experience depending on your own individual needs. But perhaps the more interesting question is, how does PlayStation 4 Pro fit into this? How close does it come to matching the PC version running at ultra settings? Well, to be honest, Pro offers up more of a refinement of the base PS4 game, but the PC version takes things several steps further. For a start, the core artwork is boosted via the use of high resolution textures, which brings about more high frequency detail across various surfaces, such as the road itself, and this is joined by the use of a high level of anisotropic filtering. We're running with 16 times here, and the difference is pretty pronounced. There's a lot more visible ground details from far away. Complementing this is an increase in draw distance for both shadows and foliage, which means there's less subtle pop-up of these elements on PC compared to console. And of course we also get high quality shadows and reflections. In fact, we get an extra layer of reflections on PC, reflecting elements such as clouds in the sky, not present on consoles. The result is we generally get a more refined package overall compared to PlayStation 4 Pro, and in fact the difference going from PS4 to PC is actually more noticeable than, say, PS4 to Pro. It's not a massive leap forward, but for those playing on large screen HD TVs the difference is certainly noticeable. But in terms of the overall consoles, it's safe to say PlayStation 4 Pro delivers the best experience here. The improved image quality and slightly refined effects are a nice touch, but really it's the more stable performance that counts, especially if you're into racing the rallycross style stages against multiple vehicles. While on PS4 and Xbox One I find the core traditional rallying to be fine. Frame rates are stable, but in terms of the rallycross and land rush events, well, I don't think that the 60 FPS target holds up well enough in order to deliver a faultless experience. So on consoles, PlayStation 4 Pro is the way to go. That said, I would have liked to have seen an additional higher resolution mode, support for those that have 4K TVs. Don't get me wrong, the 1080p support is very good here, but it does feel that UHD owners are somewhat being left out in the cold, and really going forward the best way is to provide two distinct modes, one geared towards 1080p and the other to 4K. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there for now. If you enjoyed this look at Dirt 4, then please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.